had the pleasure of meeting Hugh Coppen several years ago at the all-volunteer South Beach Yacht Club. And Hugh was in charge of all of the volunteers, and I was always impressed with his leadership and organizational abilities. And at the time, I didn't realize that he grew up in Zimbabwe and graduated from the University of Cape Town from an early age. And throughout his life, he has experienced literally hundreds of safaris and vehicles on foot and boats, paddling canoes, and even on horseback. In the course of his professional career, he has lived and worked in the US, Canada, Europe, and rose to become CEO of 3 different companies. For the last 20 years, from his home base in San Francisco, he has focused on leadership development and executive coaching with a wide range of clients in the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, and Africa. A few months ago, we had a speaker at the Breakfast Club who was a career counselor, and her advice was find something that you really enjoy and are passionate about. And I think Hugh must have been listening to that, because in 2015, he started a company called Tasimba. And that combines his twin passions for the wilderness and for the leadership by personally leading guests on deeply immersive experiential safaris in a vast private wilderness. In a lifetime of safaris, Hugh has always found the wilderness, nature, and wildlife provide an incomparable environment for self-discovery and new perspectives on, He offers fascinating insights gained from hosting Tasimba safaris back to his homeland in Africa. He shares how our inspiration, our purpose, and the beneficial impact we create are inseparably connected to our legacy as Keystone leaders for others to follow. Please welcome Hugh Coppen.
Thanks, Mike. And good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. I've enjoyed sitting in on your past 2 meetings in order to just get to know who you are and who the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, how you operate. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to talk about Africa, and in particular, as Mike said, to talk about my twin passions, which are the combination of leadership and wildlife. And I find that in my business career and in my African safari career, the two are interlinked. So I'm going to go straight to a screen share, and we'll go through. I have been well coached on this, and we will be done completed by 8:30 or sooner, because I'm told that's a requirement, and it's also a proof that I know what I'm doing. So I'll do my best to adhere to that. So if I may, I will just quickly call up my shared screen. Everyone got that? Okay, good. So the topics really of this talk really is Keystone leadership from the African wild, and there are 3 key words that I'm going to focus on, and I'll lead you through and how those words are interconnected. But the first place I want to start really is this: that the wilderness and nature is absolutely the best learning lab and the best place to learn about nature and about wildlife and about ourselves in the world. Okay, there we go. When Albert Einstein says, "Look deep into nature, and then you'll understand everything better," you know that he understood the value and the essential quality of nature to be a great teacher for us and a great place that we can learn about ourselves. As Mike said, I have spent a lifetime on safaris. I had the great fortune of going on safari when I was a kid, and every time throughout my life, although I lived away from Africa for most of my life, I've always gone back on safaris. And one of the key things that comes out of that is you learn something new every single day, and it's extraordinary. Even the wildlife guides who do it professionally, they say the same thing. There is something new that comes up, something that is different. Nature has continuous surprises for us. And so it was out of that I founded Tasimba in order to share this extraordinary learning we can get from nature, and to reconnect ourselves, whether as leaders or just as individuals, with nature, so that we also get the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, because deep in nature is where you start to have the ability to shed all of the busyness of our day-to-day and realize and start thinking about more about reflecting on ourselves. So these three words are the building blocks for Keystone leadership, and I'll walk you through how they are connected, and that's as we go ahead. So first of all, inspiration. Inspiration is what fuels passion, because when you get inspired for something, when you get really caught up in something, that's when you get the passion. And passion actually drives purpose, because then it gives you, this is what I want to do. It's my passion, it becomes my purpose. And the actions you take in fulfilling your purpose are what creates impact. So that's how those three words are connected. And I'll walk you through them individually so that you can see how that plays out. But inspiration itself as the keystone comes from seeing things in a new way. And there are a number of different things that will cause us to do that. But the one thing that does more than anything is inflection points in our life. And inflection points are these major life-changing events that occur at any point in time in our life that change our direction or change us fundamentally, or they change the paradigms, they change the values we have, or they change our approach, or they change our priorities, and they challenge us to think and or act differently. COVID was a perfect example of one of those inflection points. Everything we took for granted got upset, got completely turned on its head. And everything that we had sort of accepted as being the natural order of things became unnatural. And so many people, and I'm sure you have met many of them, I meet them all frequently in my business career. So many people, as a result of that, have been rethinking what's important to them. What do I really want to be doing? Whether they're at the end of their career or mid-career or at any stage, they've been thinking about what's really important. And another inflection point that I see every time we take people on safari is a deeply immersive safari is one of those, because I watch people as they get more deeply into it, and you see them starting to change and to evolve themselves. So how do we get this inspiration from the wild? Well, in two ways. It's what we experience on the one hand and what we feel on the other hand. For example, the wilderness itself and the vast space and the wildlife and this enormous empty space except for nature and wildlife. That itself gives you a very strong feeling after you've been there for no more than a day or two of how small we really are as human beings. Second, the natural habitat they're observing, the animals and the way they're behaving within their species, the way that they're interacting with others, the connections they have, the way that they conduct themselves. We start to adopt and see and have a great humility about ourselves and realizing this is the stuff that we learned when we came out of the wilderness ourselves. And so you start realizing this is how life was and how life is in terms of the simplicity of their relationships with each other and in their species. Next, when you get into the wilderness, you're out of your comfort zone. Now, in our homes and in our businesses and our normal lives, this is our comfort zone. We've kind of got most of this nailed down. We know where most things are and stuff like that. You get into the bush, and all of a sudden, you realize, I know nothing. I know nothing about what's going to happen here. I'm completely out of my comfort zone. And you start to own what you don't know. And for leaders, that's often a really vital step in actually learning and growing, because when you've been in your comfort zone too much, we all, as human beings, we tend to think we know it all. And then when you get there, you realize, I need to understand just how much I don't know. Vulnerability is another part of it. Vulnerability is not a weakness in leadership. Vulnerability demonstrates that you actually have the capacity to know and be vulnerable and understand that that's okay. And what that leads to, what you feel about that is you need to trust somebody or something. And you learn to trust these wildlife guides whose profession it is to keep us safe, but also to share incredible knowledge. And finally, you get this feeling of being, this is back to our roots. This is where we came from as human beings. And when you start to feel that way, you really start to reconnect very personally with nature. Inspiration comes in a number of ways. For example, you're driving along on a single track in the wilderness. It's a beautiful late summer day. The grass is green and rich and tons of nutrition in it. So the grazing animals are going to get fat and they're going to get in condition. And the track goes off into the wilderness and into the forest. And there's a big storm coming, this is part of just absolute, the magic of being in the wilderness. Or you're sitting there in a vehicle and, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. Let me back to my thing here, sorry. Here we go. You're sitting on a vehicle and you're watching a herd, literally a train of buffalo coming by. And these buffalo, there may be 200-300 of them, and they'll come by and you just stop. And these animals, they have their purpose. They know where they're going. They're all headed in the same direction, probably to a water hole. But the beauty of it all is that you're there and and you get this sense, this is this vast open space, but this is their place. This is their home. I'm the visitor here. So again, the feeling you get is the privilege of being able to participate in that, or up close and personal. This was a very, very hot day in camp, and we were sitting watching a parade of elephants going by in front of camp about 50 yards away to the water hole, taking a drink and moving on. And after about an hour, a couple of our guests were sitting there with their feet in the water, and the water in the pool's only 20 feet long, but their feet in the water. And this family of elephants, led by the matriarch, she's the big one at the back, they came up to the water, to this pool, and started drinking. And for these two guests, and for the rest of us who are just a few feet behind them, this was one of the most amazing interactions of us in the space of these beautiful, gentle giants. And it was one of those moments that those two women, and none of us who were there, will ever forget. But that's the sort of inspiration I'm talking about. Here's another way of looking at that. Howard Thurman said, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. One of the ways in which our guests truly come alive is when we go on a walk. We leave camp, we park the vehicle, we get out of the vehicle, and we go walking in the wild. And you're in the wild because you're seeing the footprints of everything that's been there: elephants, zebra, lions, hyenas, antelope, everything. We are walking in their space. And you never have a more intense feeling of awareness and of everything going on around you, and the hope that you're being kept safe by this guide at the front, but at the same time, that we are in the space of the wild animals and of wildlife and of nature, and you feel incredibly close to nature. So how we let nature actually inspire us is we help ourselves in that way in a couple of ways. First, we totally disconnect from every other form of communication. No Wi-Fi, no cell, no TV, no nothing. And guess what happens? Conversation. Who knew? And instead of having people sitting around the campfire in the middle of the wilderness under a billion stars, working away on their phones and texting with someone 10,000 miles away, we're here, and everyone is present, and everyone is sharing their own experience of what we saw today and what's happening. The next part about that is we have time, and we make the time to watch, and importantly, to listen and to feel and to reflect, because that time allows us to learn more. The more we watch, the more we learn. And in nature, we then see that everything is connected somehow with itself. Nature has these extraordinary connections, and it's going on all the time, and that we are a part of that. As one very good friend of mine, who is one of the top conservationists in Southern Africa, Dr. Ian McCallum, what he says is, there's no such thing as human nature. There is only nature. So it's the wisdom of nature and being in it and being immersed in it and not having any distractions at all that makes you come alive. I'll give you a couple of stories of how nature makes you realize some of these things. You're probably wondering, when you look at that picture, why are those roan antelope standing there watching the lion walking by? Why are they not running for the forest? Well, one of the most precious things in wildlife is energy, particularly if you're a prey animal, and you don't use it unless you have to. So they watch and see if there's a threat, before they start running. Only when they know that there's a real threat, that's when they run, because they may need that energy for a real threat. Why didn't these ones run? Because they saw that this lioness limps. And when they saw her limping, they said, we can stand here because she's not going to catch us. If she turned towards us, we're gone in a moment. So they know they're safe from that. So so that's the first part, is preserving energy and not reacting in a panic mode to every slightest danger. From the lion's point of view, why was she limping? Well, she was in the pride and they were hunting down a buffalo. And in the course of the hunt, the buffalo trod on her foot and broke the bones in her foot. So she can't run. And if you can't run, you can't hunt. And if you can't hunt with the pride, you don't eat with the pride. In fact, you get kicked out of the pride. So she and her 1-year-old cub were kicked out of the pride. She now had to find a way to feed herself and her cub. So she completely changed everything she knew about hunting, which was hunting in a pride, 10 or so animals at a time. She changed her entire method of hunting to a stealth hunter. She would hide in the tall grass or in thickets and wait for an unsuspecting animal to separate slightly from a grazing herd, come by, and she would pounce on that and then get her meal and feed her cub. And she's been doing that now for several years, and the cub is fully grown. Interestingly, what she learned how to do is how leopards hunt, because they're solitary hunters. But she had the resilience to learn a different way of hunting and the adaptability to become good at it, so that she survived, and so did her son. So again, lessons from the wild. Here's another example. Baboons, when they see the slightest bit of danger, want to go straight up a tree. That's their safe place. Get up a tree, sit in a fork of a tree. And so that's a safe place. We stopped by this young female, and she watched us for a few minutes, and that behind her is a leadwood tree, but it's dead. And so the bark is all gone, but the tree is so strong, it'll stand there for a long, long time. She goes up the tree. So watch what happens when she does that. She's carrying a baby. It's not a baby, that's a juvenile. That's a big lump of baboon she's carrying. So it's very hard. She's having a hard time with grip on the tree. But as she gets up here, now I want you to watch carefully. Here comes a hand of another baboon already up there to pull her safely into the tree. And so what we see in that is we see wild animals actually caring for and caring about each other. Or this shot. I took this about 6 weeks ago on the Zambezi River. Golden sunset, the sun setting behind the escarpment, and 2 elephants. We'd watched them for about an hour, came across from one side of the river, crossing to the other side. Don't ask me why. Why did the chicken cross the road? Why did the elephants cross? Well, they thought maybe some of the grazing may be better on the other side. But at this moment that we caught them, and we saw them backlit by the sunset, and they raised their trunks, and it's as if they're raising their trunks in salute to the sunset. It wasn't actually. That's what they're doing, is sniffing the air to make sure that any danger on the breeze. But it was just this a magical moment of wildlife and silhouetted in a fantastic sunset. And for me, that becomes one of my iconic images of Africa. And I look at that, and it's inspiring. So what we get from the wild then is we get acute self-awareness. We start to look at ourselves differently. We get self-discovery. We start to see and think differently, because we don't have any of these distractions. We only have nature around us. It starts to change our perspectives. It helps us reflect on what's really important to us. It may not have anything to do with wildlife or the nature, but it has to do with what's really important to us in our lives. And it starts to free up that inspiration to think differently about ourselves and about what we want to be doing when we get back home. And that's where the passion comes in. I have a great quote from Bishop Jakes. If you can't figure out your purpose, figure out your passion, for your passion will lead you right into your purpose. So that's the way that I link then from inspiration into purpose. So what's your purpose? When we are asking ourselves that question, we're going into the question, why am I here? Not just here in Africa, not just here in San Francisco, or wherever each one of us is on this call, but why am I here on earth? Why do I exist? What's really important to me? What do I want to accomplish in my life? What makes me feel fulfilled? What outcomes do I want to achieve? What do I want to do? with the rest of my life? And that last question is what a lot of people have been asking as we emerge from COVID, because it made us question so many of the things we took for granted. So we start to see people adopting and taking on a new purpose. And when you have your purpose and start acting on it, that's when where impact comes in. Our impact is really how our actions affect others. And the key to that is this: everything we do has impact, everything. We're always being watched. I think as one of the quotes we put up there was, we are all watching each other's face on this Zoom. We're watching each other, particularly when you're a leader in any situation. People are watching you for your leadership. That's why you're in a leadership role in whatever it is you do. And individually and collectively, we leave a footprint. Let's face it, our human footprint on the planet is not exactly delicate. It's clumsy. It's incredibly destructive. But we leave a footprint. So the question we should be asking ourselves, what tracks are you leaving for others to follow? Because essentially that's what tracking is. That's what tracking is in the wild. That's what tracking is in our lives. What tracks are we leaving for others to follow? There's one species, or one set of species that leave and create special tracks for that others follow. And that's ones we call keystone species. Remember what a keystone is? Keystone is that wedge at the top of an archway, that wedge-shaped stone that puts in there, and it creates pressure around the archway so that even without mortar, it holds the archway up because of the pressure of the keystone. In the wild, keystone species are those whose existence creates a beneficial outcome. That's the critical part, beneficial outcome for others in their ecosystem. And that ecosystem would radically change if that species were not there. In other words, keystone species have real impact. Let's talk about some keystone species. Obviously, the one that everyone first thinks of in keystone species are bees. Yeah, bees, because they are the pollinators of the world, and you cannot imagine where we would be or what the world would be like without bees. So they create a beneficial outcome for others, many others in the ecosystem. But here's a couple more. Here on the coast of California, sea otters. You know that we have kelp forest in the coastal waters and that coastal shallows. And the kelp forests are essential because they get to be the nursery for all sorts of small marine animals and the young of many of the marine animals. And they shelter there because the predators can't get them and don't get them in the kelp forest. Well, the kelp forest dies away each season and then comes up again as the water gets warmer again in the spring. But if the sea urchins, which breed like crazy, start to take over the sea floor, the kelp forest can't grow. And when the kelp forest can't grow, there's no nursery for all those other small marine species. And that's where the sea otters come in. Because as you can tell, this guy lying flat on his back on the surface has got himself a meal of 5 sea urchins. So sea otters are helping keep the sea urchin population under control, which is allowing the kelp forest to grow, benefit to others. Or another one. We all know the story of the wolves in Yellowstone. In 1925, they were pretty much wiped out. For 70 years, it was wiped out. The ecology changed. The elk population ballooned. So you now have a huge overpopulation of one species. And that had an impact on vegetation, had an impact on the waterways, had an impact on a lot of things. And then they reintroduced the wolves, 12 of them, that's all, in 1995. And now there's about 500. But guess what? The elk population is back down to where it can be sustainable within the park. Other species have started to come in. The birds have come back. The vegetation has grown. The beavers have come back and they're reworking the waterways. It has recreated the entire ecology of Yellowstone because the wolves came back. In Africa, you know where I'm going with this one, don't you? These guys. These are the keystone species. Several reasons. First, elephants are big and make pathways, whether it's through the tall grass or whether it's through the forest, but the elephants make pathways. And in doing so, they're creating game trails for all the other wild animals. What's the importance of elephant pathways? Just this: in Africa, every elephant pathway leads to water. So the other game doesn't need to go crashing through the bush or creating their own trails. They just simply follow an elephant pathway to get down to the water. The other thing they do is they also then they love the shoots and the young shoots of trees as the forest starts to try to encroach on the grassland. Forest in many places will naturally encroach on the grassland, and they start to trim that and they eat that, and that stops the forest from encroaching. So the grassland stays at its size. All the grazing is good. The grazing animals, the impala, the antelope, the zebra, the wildebeest, they still have plenty of grassland. Finally, and this is the most important, one of the most important parts, elephants have an absolutely horrible digestive system, meaning that 70% of the nutritional value of what they eat goes right out the back door about 20 hours later. Now that's not very efficient, but on the other hand, they love to eat seed pods, acacia seed pods or palm tree seed pods, but they love seeds. But the seeds go in and they get germinated through this journey through a nice warm belly and come out the back end wrapped in a great big ball of dung, which is actually really nutritious manure. And that's why elephants are called Africa's gardeners, because those seeds have the potential to plant and take root and grow up as the next trees in the forest. But what also happens with that dung is that it supports a lot of other animals. Birds go in there and break it open and look for the seeds. Baboons go in and do the same. Insects do the same. So a lot of other animals are benefiting from this lousy digestive system of elephants because their dung is so nutritious. So that again, they're creating in a number of ways a beneficial outcome for others. Keystone species. So here's the question. Are humans a keystone species? Can you think of any species that is dependent on us for a beneficial outcome? Okay, your dog will soon become feral if we weren't here, and your cat already is. But anything else? There's not another species on the planet that is dependent on us. So we are not a keystone species, but we can become keystone leaders. We can behave in the way of a keystone leader. Here's how. Keystone leaders dare to dream and to become passionate about something. And in that respect, as we've talked, therefore they live with purpose. They have a real purpose, and that's their focus. They have the values, the beliefs, the behaviors of all good leaders. But as we saw with the baboons, they also have a deep care for others, because if you're creating beneficial outcome for others, the definition of keystone species, you care for others, like the baboons on the tree. And they create pathways, like the elephants, for others to follow. So there's the linkage of inspiration, purpose, and impact into keystone leaders. Talking about impact, Jane Goodall, who is the great conservationist of the chimpanzees and is an extraordinary woman, has said this: you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. Let me introduce you to a couple of keystone leaders. On the right, that's Tendai Katai. On the left, that's Mike Nioni. These are both professional wildlife guides in Zimbabwe. They are the guys who we have now used for the past 5 or 6 of our trips as our guides. They both grew up in different rural villages as kids, poverty-stricken rural villages, but they started to fall in love with nature when they were acting as herd boys for the cattle of the village or whatever. And they both eventually decided to go and start doing things and learning how to be wildlife guides. They came up through the wildlife guide curriculum. And in Zimbabwe, that is one tough curriculum, toughest in Africa by far. It takes a minimum of 6 years, and in many cases more, to get to qualify to be a professional wildlife guide. How rare is it? They put those regulations, that curriculum and those qualifications in place in 1980, on the year of independence. And here we are in 2022, and there have only been 194 professional wildlife guides who have made that grade. These guys are 2 of them. Why are they keystone leaders? They have the inspiration every day to be excited to get out into the bush because they know that nature will have some surprise, something will have gone on during the night. Their purpose is clear. They want to share their knowledge and their passion and their excitement and everything about the wildlife with their guests, with the guests who are fortunate enough to be guided by them. And their impact, the impact is on what those guests take away, which is an experience they'll never forget, which is the opportunity to learn, and which is something which may change their lives. So these guys, in their own way, are Keystone leaders. The legacy of Keystone leadership is this. It's not, the legacy is not material. It's not the material things we leave behind. It's what we will be remembered for. That's Keystone legacy. What people will say about us after we're gone. It's how we touched and benefited others. And it's how we gave lasting meaning to our lives. Maya Angelou said it best. If you're going to live, leave a legacy. Make a mark on the world that can't be erased. So I want to leave you with a photo of one of my favorite lions. This is Xander, and Xander was one of Cecil the lion's last cubs. And Xander grew up to have a pride of his own. And one day when we were out on a drive, he was lying right beside the track, and we were about 6 feet away from him. And we sat there for about 45 minutes, just looking at this beautiful animal and look deep into those eyes. And you just get this feeling of absolute understanding and a closeness to wildlife like you've never felt before. But I just want to leave you with the thought, may the wondrous learning lab of nature inspire you to become a Keystone leader. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, Hugh. That was an amazing presentation. Great stories. Thank you for sharing that. And that photo at the end was amazing to be able to look into that lion's eyes like that. So
Unbelievable. Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
any questions from anybody in the audience? Raise your hand, or Bill Buchanan, anybody else? And then Susan Rowan. Go ahead, Bill. Don't forget to come off mute.
Hello. Good morning, Hugh. Bill Buchanan. Thank you very much for a great presentation. I'm amazed at your ability to integrate your love of nature into, making a living. That's always been my challenge. Ever since I was a, preteen, I think I've been going out in the wilderness lately. A 100-mile trip by canoe through Ontario with my wife, 100 miles walk from Yosemite up to Sonora solo, more, about an even mix of solo and, company trips. But I fully endorse your impressions here of the benefits of nature. And, I many times I have been on some, rocky crag somewhere by myself up in, the Sierras or someplace like that, and said to myself, a lot of the high-tech hotshots say, we rule the world, we can write the code. And I'm looking at a thunderstorm, a couple miles away, striking lightning. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how would you write a code for this? And I have not figured it out, but you know what that does, like you say, when you start thinking about things and how they work and how you work in that environment, is it kind of leads to religion in a way. It has for me. I mean, I'm a Christian, but otherwise, how do you explain that? How do the seasons come and go? How does this little meadow filter out the water? And, everything is synchronized. But I'll have to agree with you that, not only is there a benefit to being out there, and I get more benefit when I'm alone out there by myself, working my way through some wilderness. But I really enjoy going out with people who have the kind of passion that you have for nature. Because, you're out there, you do different things in business, you come from different backgrounds, but you have one really common denominator, and that is a love of nature, preserving it and experiencing it. So let me end up with a recommendation like Betty Tache does. Here's a book for you. You probably already read it. I can't remember the author, but the title is The Nature Fix. And the theme is something I've known for decades, and that is that nature has such beneficial psychological, physiological effects on you. You need to get out there. Thank you very much. You had a great presentation.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. And I couldn't agree with you more. Interestingly, every time when we take people on our safaris, one of the things I've noticed is that people come and want to join my safari for one reason, and that is these are curious people, the serial learners, the people who don't just want to go and take pictures. They want to actually get deeper into it. They really want to have the time and the space to do that. And so to your point, they're the sort of people who then find that they're on a trip with other people who are like-minded. Everyone came to learn. And so there's a wonderful collective of learning. And at the same time, each person is taking it individually, and it's becoming individually important to them, as well as this collective, the collective learning.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Very completely.
All right, Susan Rowan, followed by Anastasia, and then Tim Durkin.
In your honor, Hugh, my cup from seeing the big five in Kruger, and I unfortunately am the person who went on the photo safari with friends from Durban. But one of the things when I was there was that I saw the protests for the poachers and the people that were using and killing the animals for their, the tusks, etc., and the rhinos. What is anything you're doing, or what do you see when that happens, that there are safaris that actually kill animals? Is there anything that Zimbabwe or any of the countries are doing to stop those people?
Well, yes.
Gladly hold up the carcass and of a beautiful, gorgeous animal as joy that they've killed them.
Zimbabwe does have hunting concessions where there are quotas and where the hunters are allowed to do that. And whether I agree with that or not, there's an argument made by professional hunters that they are actually doing, and that's helping in conservation. I don't personally happen to buy that. What we do where we go is a national park, and there's no hunting at all, nor has there been for 100 years or more. And so as a result, the animals there are not in any way threatened or not in any way spooked by it. There's also right there in the concession that on the national park that we go to, an anti-poaching unit. And we always take our guests there for half a day to talk with these guys, people who live 6 weeks at a time in the bush on patrol, looking for and for both wire snares, which are put in there by local villagers to try to catch small animals for bushmeat, but also the bigger poachers. What we ourselves have done in Tasimba, we have actually so far in the last year, we have given 4 trail cams so that they can mount them, and they've got special housing to mount them so the elephants can't tear them down, because elephants are curious beasts, and they want to take a look and see what is this thing. But we've given them 4 set trail cams, and they're learning more and more about the habits of some of the animals in their area. But more importantly, they're also using it to identify any poachers who are coming in. So there's anti-poaching units which are doing that, and it's critical work to be able to preserve both the wildlife on the one hand, but also the balance in nature, so that it doesn't get disturbed by this amount of poaching that's been going on in Africa. They have cut it down in Zimbabwe extraordinarily well, but it's still going on in other parts. I mean, the elephant population in the park we go to is the 2nd highest elephant population in the world, right after Botswana. And in the concession we go to is the highest concentration within the park. I mean, we'll see literally hundreds a day, and you know how privileged you are to see elephants like that, and you know how important it is to protect them against poaching.
And on the speaking thing, this was wonderful. I took pages of notes because I could relate to what you're saying. But what I learned, and I didn't know till I was near a lake in Kruger, that the hippos are dangerous. I just thought they used to be adorable, like in the movie Madagascar, and I found out they kill you.
Yeah, they're pretty ornery and very territorial, and you do not want to be between the hippo and the water when he decides he's going to run for the water, because he will destroy anything in his path.
Thank you.
Kill more than other animals. So,
Sorry?
But I hear they kill more people than other animals.
Well, yeah, that we know of. I think what happens, I mean, crocodiles aren't exactly the least, the most friendly either, but crocodiles tend to then take someone and they will drown them and then keep them underwater. So people disappear. But so there's no accurate count on how many people crocodiles take. But hippos, crocodiles, you know, they are the major. They're the major ones who threaten local populations of villagers.
Say, Hugh, Mike Milstein, can you hear me?
I can, Mike.
Had a power outage out at my home, and you're coming in and out. But at any rate, I think it would be nice if you could tell the Breakfast Clubbers how they might subscribe to your newsletter.
Oh, okay, yeah. That would be great. If you go to our website, which is www.tasimba, tasimba.com, a pop-up will come on screen, and you can just sign up there for our newsletter. We put out a newsletter once a month, and we also put out 2 photo journals each month as well. So just a bunch of photos, but also with the monthly newsletter. And we try to link what we're doing, but more importantly, we try to make it on a broader basis and keep the newsletter of interest to anybody. We have a good readership, and we have people who enjoy the writing and enjoy the newsletter. So thanks for that, Mike. By the way, the word Tasimba has nothing to do with the Lion King. I want to make sure that you know that. And because a lot of people say, oh, it's about the Lion King. No, it's got nothing to do with that, I promise. It is a word in the Shona language in Zimbabwe, which means together we are strong. And that's sort of the bonding that happens on a safari when you're with the same 8 or 10 people for 7 whole days in the bush. They become bonded as like a clan. So
Cool. Anastasia, and then Tim Durkin.
Oh, Hugh. That was beautiful, touching. I also took a ton of notes, and I'm just so impressed with everything that you've shared. I actually want to know about your safaris. So can you tell us how you operate them, how often you do, tell us a little bit about that. So, I mean, it's been on a life list of mine to ultimately get to Africa and go on safari, but I would love to know specifically a little bit about how you put together your programs and, size, attendees, etc. So if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
I will tell you a little bit about it, but I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, but I will.
Well, I understand. And by the way, y'all, we did not discuss this at all. This is just coming purely from me, curiosity,
Right.
Also from tourism. I know that this is really important that people know. It's not a sales thing.
Yeah.
It's letting us know about opportunities. So.
Yeah. Well, what the reason and why we made it the way it is I drew the learning I'd had over my lifetime. I thought, what are the best things I've ever learned? So we created what is structurally a very unique safari. For example, we stay 7 nights in the same camp. And most safaris you go on will be 2 or 3 nights, then you move somewhere else, 2 or 3 nights, 2 or 3 nights. That's the way the industry operates. We go in for 7 nights. We also take exclusive occupancy of the camp. So there's no revolving door of guests coming in and out like there is in every other camp. It's just us in that camp for 7 days. And it's the same group of people who, as I said earlier, they chose to come with us because they want to learn more. So for that, that starter gives you this sense of of creating a collective learning and a collective experience. Then we also, every day, we'll get up early, 5 o'clock. We'll be out on the vehicles by 6 in the morning. We'll stop for coffee at 8:30. We will at 10 o'clock or 10:15. We stop out in the bush under a tree, and the guys will put out camp stools, and we will have what we call an indaba, which is a traditional African meeting where the elders of a clan or a tribe would sit around and talk about something of importance. And we guide discussions. And a lot of the discussions that we guided, for example, we did it particularly in this last trip in May, was around inspiration, purpose, and impact. But we also then bring in from time to time an outside speaker. In this case, we brought in a wonderful Zimbabwean woman who's a conservationist and a PhD from Oxford in lion ecology, and who's now doing amazing work with the villages near the wildlife areas to help the villagers benefit from being so close to the wildlife areas and protect their lives from the invasion of elephants, perhaps, or lions coming in. So she would come in and inspired. She was amazing for our guests. And we bring in somebody like that. And then we get back to camp for brunch. and an afternoon, which we call Africa time, where we just say, sit and watch and listen. Sit on the deck of your room and watch the wilderness and listen to the sounds and let today soak into you. This is where I mentioned in the presentation, have time to think, to reflect, to listen. And then we have get out in the afternoon drive, sundowners. That elephant shot wasn't coincidental. It's traditional in safaris, you stop for sundowners and then come back into camp for dinner and campfire. But the purpose that we're trying to do in our safaris is my partner and I are there the whole time. We don't just send people out on safari, we go because we want to be able for you to get and to see some of these things through the eyes, in my case, of someone who grew up there, someone for whom this is home. And so it's an added level of engagement that people get because I'm sharing with you my stories of home. And just like Bill, who talked about paddling down, paddling in Ontario. I've paddled down the Zambezi River, down that stretch where I took that photo, about 120 miles, camping overnight on the river. And it was the most incredible experience because you know that we're just pitching camp and anything can come by. I mean, one night we knew that there was a leopard, he was around, you could hear him all night long. But you're there, and it's part of the magic of being deep in nature. And that's what we're trying to do, is to immerse people deeply in nature, take longer to be there. We also go to a rural village, and when we're in that rural village, we meet with the headman and our guests ask him questions about, well, how do you run a village where you've got no income? I mean, what's the income sources here? How do you do that? And how do you keep your people fed and happy and so on? So we try again to engage people in the culture, as well as in the nature, as well as in the collective learning of being with each other, as well as in bringing in outside experts, going to the anti-poaching unit. So we're trying it every way we can to broaden and deepen our guests' experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I feel like I could still have you go on forever, but that's enough that we have a taste, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Tim Durkin, you had a question.
Yes, Hugh. I think all of us can say that we have had a transcendent moment somewhere out in nature, whether it's New Mexico or whether it's in the Bay Area. Bill Buchanan talks about Yosemite and so on. And every time we try to describe that transcendent moment, we find out that we lessen it every time we try to talk about it. But what you did today in describing the moments that you have experienced that are relatively routine, through your gift of eloquence, I felt the very same joy, the very same feeling that I think everybody on that trip was. You have a gift, and I thank you so much for sharing that gift with us today, because just your style, your natural style, whatever it is, I felt like looking into the eyes of that lion, watching that baboon, seeing those elephants. They were transcendent to me, and I'm looking at you in a pretty small screen. I love your idea about lifelong learning. I always tell people that the cure for boredom is curiosity, and there is no cure for curiosity.
Exactly. And
Thank
the
you.
learning never stops, no matter where we are, or how old we are, or how long it goes on. Keep on learning, keep on being curious. I agree with you, Tim. Thank you for your kind comments.
Great. Any other questions? Bert, you raised your hand.
Yeah, let me come on. Yeah, I'm very saddened by the fact that we are the last generation to visit so many areas. I hear this year that the Pacific Crest Trail is largely closed because of fire and drought. And I'm saddened that more of the public doesn't realize that what we're losing every year now, we can see, and they still are generating greenhouse gases like crazy. People are still buying cars that do it. They buy big SUVs. They do all these things that are destroying these places that we're the last people to see. I go do a lot of hiking in the Cascades and that sort of thing, and same thing. So, any comments about that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you completely. I think it's David Attenborough who said we cannot let our grandchildren only know elephants by the picture books they will have. But you're absolutely right. And I think that again, when you get people and have the opportunity to get people into the wilderness like that, that's when they start to realize we've got to preserve all the wilderness we have left on this planet. And we have been avariciously destroying wilderness to put up parking lots or housing estates or whatever. But we have got to preserve the wilderness because it is an essential part of the planet. It is the where we came from, not only that, but it's also where nature exists in its most pure and unspoiled form. So I agree with you completely. And I that's one of the benefits that I hope that our guests all come away with, and that is and that anybody who goes on safari comes away with, and that is we've got to do what we can to preserve and to stop this continuous human encroachment on the most precious parts of our world, our nature, our vast empty wildernesses, the ocean, the air, the whole bit. We're using it up. We are not preserving it. We are using it, and that to me is one of the great tragedies right now of our species.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions for Hugh? Bill, another?
Hugh, I just had I have a question that I wasn't able to pose, and that is that my wife and I live in southern Marin County. I don't know where you are. Where are you located?
I'm in San Francisco.
Okay, so about 22 years ago, we had an influx of coyotes to the point where they were eating the cats, they were attacking the dogs. They were afraid that they're going to go after the elementary school kids down the block. And we're right near 40 acres called Horse Hill, right down the block from us. And so I teamed up with a group they're called the Coyote Project. The leader of that is a woman, very nice woman named Camilla Fox. And so she and I went up, had a beer up on the hill and watched the coyotes and tried to figure out what the heck's going on here. Why are they out there walking around in broad daylight? Well, we finally were able to identify kind of an alpha coyote, and he was taken care of by animal specialists, euthanized, and strangely, the whole pack, and of course coyotes aren't in packs, but they disappeared. And we really haven't seen much of them. Now I have 2 hunting dogs, so we go up there on the hill every other day to keep them in good condition. We've had some encounters. One of them cost me $900 in vet bills, but we try to coexist, and we understand, especially from my linkage with the Coyote Project, we kind of understand their lifestyle, what to do and what not to do. We put out flyers for all the 200 homes here in Scott Valley, try to get them to understand, don't leave food out, except the whole mantra, right? Now, here's my question. And we were successful, I think, because we haven't really had an influx like that in a long time. Do you get involved in helping villagers live with predators who are about to wipe them out economically?
Yeah. Yes, that was what I was alluding to, that this Zimbabwean conservationist does. And I've got to tell you her name. Has a beautiful name. Her name is Dr. More Angels Mbiza. And she has a sibling called More Blessings, because her parents decided that those were the names they wanted their children to live by. So she's Dr. More Angels Mbiza, but that's exactly what she's doing. This whole issue that you're raising is of human-animal conflict, and it's a big one in Africa, just as it can be anywhere. And that is where we get into the proximity with animals, and generally speaking, in that, when that happens, humans win and the animals lose. And what she is doing is helping the villagers protect themselves. The 2 major culprits for villagers are elephants who come out of the park and who can go into one villager's crops and destroy his complete crop, which would feed his family for a year with the staple diet of maize, destroy that in a night. Or lions, which will come in and kill their goats, or especially their cattle. And cattle in African culture is wealth. And so for the villagers, then in the past, they would put out poisoned meat to try to kill the lions, or they would try to shoot the elephants in order to chase them away. And she's working with the villagers on ways which they can sustainably just keep resist this. There's two examples. One, if what they do is they get a whole lot of buffalo dung, and trust me, there's enough of that to go on for, that's a totally sustainable and resource. And they mix it with chili and to make a porridge, and then they bake it into sort of a cake. And they put that cake out at night, and they light it, and it smolders away. And the smell of that chili, elephants hate it. And so the elephants don't come anywhere near it. And the next day they put out another one, the next night put out another one, and so on. So that's one way that she's giving them the tools and in effect, the technology to keep the elephants away. So far as the lions are concerned, what they do is for $300, they have developed a very tough screen, which people can put around the pens, or the bomas they're called there, where their livestock are overnight. And the lions can't see into that. And because the lions can't see into that, they're not then jumping into the boma to take the livestock out. But there are other ways that she is introducing stuff. And there's a number of different places where this combination of giving the villagers a way of protecting themselves, but without it being destructive of the animals. There's a number of ways that's going on in Africa. I'm just happy that we are involved with her and with the work she's doing. So when we go into the rural village, we can actually see how that's working in practice, and we can donate and help them, get the tools they need to be able to protect themselves without killing the wild animals.
That's admirable. Thank you.
Oh, Patricia, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I always want to know who is the first person that is experimenting with dung and chili to come up with the solution.
People who care, people who really care, and they say, we've got to find some way of doing this. So who knew it would be buffalo dung? But hey, what a way to make a porridge.
Or some guy like me who just says, I wonder what this would taste like.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Well, Hugh, thank you. So, one more. Betty, do you have one?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but Hugh, it was a wonderful presentation in all regards. And this is the first time I have seen such amazing quotes, number one, but beautifully presented. I mean, they're gorgeous with the station, however you did the flowers and everything around them, and the background with the African scenes. It was really magical, and thank you. And it just made much more of an impact than words, black print on a screen. And thank you for your words of wisdom. It was wonderful.
Betty, thank you. And don't thank me for that. My partner is a brilliant woman who is creative, and she's the most organized person, thank God, because I'm not. And she's the one who makes a lot of things happen on Tasimba. And so I will certainly pass your compliment on to her, because I was kind of proud of those slides as well. And that's all her handiwork.
Very good. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And maybe our next, or not next, but one of our Golden Gate Breakfast Club live events might be a safari in Tasimba.
Yes, you're welcome. It would be great. Thank you so much for having me, Tony. Thank you all for being here. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I'm going to leave. I've got work to do, and I'm going to leave the room open for those of you who want to stay around and chat. Anybody want to be the host when I leave? Patricia, Craig, anybody? Nope. All right. Well, y'all have a good day and a good week, and we'll see you next week.